योगेन चित्तस्य पदेन वाचां मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपाकरोत्तं प्रवरं मुनीनां पतञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिमानतोऽस्मि। लये सम्बोधयेच्चित्तं विक्षिप्तं शमयेत् पुनः सकाशायं विजानीयात् समप्राप्तं न चालयेत्। Om. So in our last class, we said that only a pure mind and then only a pure person can succeed in yoga. So without purity, there is no success in yoga. So we can practice yogasana and hatha yoga. So what does hatha yoga and yogasana do? It is going to give us a good, supple, healthy body. But can it give manashanti is the question. So this is very, very important, that what are we expecting out of yoga practice? If we are expecting just a good sculpted body, then we go to hatha yoga. But if you want to have control on mind, you have to come to Yoga Shastra, because purification is the first project, and for purification, Patanjali Maharshi introduces Yama and Niyama. If Yama and Niyama was not introduced, please consider what would have happened. What would have happened to this entire philosophy? Suppose he had simply dived into saying, you do dharana and dhyana. Do a little bit of pranayama so that you can bring your mind to the center and then cleanse it and then keep it open. And then you go for dharana and dhyana. Please think what would have happened. As long as we are sitting in after pranayama and do dharana, say on the Ishtadevata, and you do a little bit of dhyana, you come back. As soon as we come back to society, to come back to ourselves, chitta vritti will go back to vikshipta, kshipta, muda state. And therefore, as Patanjali Maharshi says, so even before you do anything, including even before you do asana, we have to practice yama niyama. Of course, it can happen concurrently. There is no doubt about that. Because otherwise, by the time we get to master over yama and niyama, it is going to be 25 years. So that we can do concurrently. But focus is on yama niyama, because the problem with not having yama niyama is the vrittis. Vrittis are identifiable. What is the state of my mind? What turnings are happening in my mind is identifiable. I am anxious, I am worried, I am afraid, I am confused. All of those things are palpable and recognizable. If it was only a contemplation on vrittis, then also there is no problem. But the difficulty with vrittis is, the more and more we continue to delve in the same chitta vritti, it is going to create a samskara. The whole gamut of emotions. So the more and more we think about one thing that is bothering us, you think about it once, okay, twice, okay, but more than that, if we continue, it is going to create a samskara. And if we continue to focus on that chitta vritti, it is going to create a vasana. That is the danger. Once it goes to the root of vasana in the personality, then it becomes very, very difficult to neutralize that. And therefore one has to be very, very careful about every chitta vritti, every karma has to be very cautiously observed. Therefore, in private life as well as in public life, every experience is going to create a chitta vritti, And that chitta-vritti has got to be trained by means of yama-niyama. And therefore, Patanjali Maharshi is introducing to reinforce and sustain the momentum of control of the mind. Yama-niyama is critical. Now, Yama-niyama also, you can, if you see, as we will see, it involves others. It is not a practice like dhyana, where we do it in solitude. So, what kind of environment in which we practice yama-niyama? It has to happen in the company of satsanga. So, if we have to have any prospect of efficient dhyana, until we perfect, we have to be in the company of noble people. So important. This is one of the reasons why we see that from the beginning in our culture, there has been a focus on satsanga. What do we see? You take any Purana for that matter. How does every Purana, including Mahabharata, how does it start? In Naimisharanya, the Shaunaka, the rishis were sitting and contemplating. And then a question was asked by one of the persons in the assembly, and dharma, artha, kama, moksha discussion will take place. So an environment was created. Bhagavan Buddha, we see that he was meditating alone. He abandons company, saying that it is this company that is stopping me in my spiritual progress. So he gives up his family, he gives up his wife, gives up his child, and then he is alone. And in that solitude, he discovers some realities. And after that, what did he do? He created the Sangha. 3 or 4 disciples. Parivrajka. He went on going from place to place. And then these 3 or 4 Modgala and Ananda, and what were they doing? They were actually listening to Buddha's discussions, and in that conversation they were also recording it. There is nowhere that Buddha sat down with pen and paper or whatever medium to write anything. It was all orally transmitted. Oral transmission of values happens in satsanga. Study, writing notes, writing a book, writing a thesis, all that happens in solitude. Real transformation happens in satsanga only. So then the question arises, what is satsanga? What is the quality of satsanga? How do we quantify this is satsanga? That's where ahimsa, satya, asteya, shaucham, indriya nigraha, etc. Yama-niyama is introduced. On the face of it, what it looks like is all these yama-niyamas are all to be practiced by the individual. Definitely the individual practices ahimsa, asteya, that is non-appropriation, satyam, etc. But it happens in the midst of society. And therefore, Patanjali Maharshi is actually saying we have to be in good company, though not in so many words. But you have to go back and read behind his intention. Otherwise, tapaswadhyaya ishvara pranidhanani kriya yogaha, which he said in 2nd chapter, 1st sutra, was enough. That is complete by itself. Why introduce Ashtanga Yoga? Because Ashtanga Yoga presupposes being in good company. So Mahaparinirvana takes place of the Buddha actually leaves his body. After they left the body, how did the satsanga got formalized? Naimisharanya, already we have a template. Everybody would go to Naimisharanya and then they would sit in front of the Shaunakadi Maharshis. Mahavira people would go and sit with him. Bhagavan Buddha's Mahaparinirvana happened the students are left. And what did all these students do? They created the Sangha. That is why you will see simple statement like Buddham Sharanam Gacchami, Dharmam Sharanam Gacchami, Sangham Sharanam Gacchami came. Buddham Sharanam Gacchami because of the wisdom. Then Dharma because of my conduct. All Ashtanga Yoga is conduct. Then Sangham Sharanam Gacchami. All the three are inevitable. So every fortnight, on Amavasya day and on Purnima day, the entire Sangha would assemble. You will see the same thing in the Puranas also on Parva Dinas. We call it as Parva Dinas, on special days. Sankranti days, for example. Naimisharanya people would go and assemble. And this also got standardized in the time of Buddha when he said, in the time of Buddha's students, when they formed the Sangha, they said, let us meet together on Amavasya day and on Purnima day. And they gave a name for this. They called it as the Upastha days. Upa means near, stha means to sit near. So they created this Upastha day. And on this Upastha days when they got together, so just as we do on Sunday afternoon, this was the Upastha time every week. Instead of every fortnight they had, we are doing it every week. So what do we do in this Upastha time? We recap and reaffirm our learning. Important point to note. In our assembly, when we are sitting together, we are not learning anything new. Actually, we are putting to test in the Sangha what we know, whether it is I have understood properly or not. Do we really need to get together to study Yoga Shastra? Tell me. How much of literature is there? There is no need for us to sit together and study at all. But why do we do that? It is because whatever I have studied, have I understood properly? And there are some concepts that Patanjali Maharshi says, have any of us actually experimented with that? And what is our experience? This happens in Upastha days. So, initially, we had Hinduism, Jainism, and all that started this. In due course, in fact, in the morning, I was speaking at the Hindu University of America. I was speaking on the Bharatiya Devalaya Samskriti, the concept of temple. The temple is a center of such Upastha time. Unfortunately, we have reduced the temple to just a place where you go, do an archana, or do a homa, or then participate in some utsava. But then we are not created, we are losing that original intention of the temple. The original intention of the temple was dharma vichara was taking place. Did you know until about probably 11th, 12th century, when criminal justice has to be decided, the king would come and sit in the temple. Civil matters was discussed in the court because punishment involves himsa. So the king will come and sit in the temple, prostrate before the deity in the temple and say, in your presence I am going to do criminal justice, disposing or dispensing of criminal justice. In your name I am going to do. That means you see that how much of Yamanayama practice was done in Sangha, in Satsanga. So therefore, what is the conclusion we draw? Ashtanga Yoga, learning is done in solitude, practiced and strengthened in Satsanga. And therefore, the mere statement of Tapaswadhyaya Ishvara Pranidhanani Kriya Yoga was inadequate. So after building the edifice of saying, okay, why do we do that? Why do we do this Kriya Yoga? Kleshatanu Karanarthascha, so that all the kleshas are weakened. Then what are the kleshas? The definition of the kleshas. All of that was done. And now we come to say that how do we even start? And what is the first and the foremost practice that has to happen in solitude and solidified in satsanga? Ahimsa. You can see the very first word taken in the Ashtanga Yoga is ahimsa. Ahimsa, satyam, asteya, brahmacharya, aparigraha, yamaha. Sutra number 30. So the supreme importance was given to yama. The beauty about all Indian scripture is the very first statement made is the most important statement. The top-down approach. After that, they build on that. Yogas chitta vritti nirodha. First statement. For the most advanced student, he need not study anymore, isn't it? That is enough. Tapasvadhyaya Ishvara Pranidhanani Kriya Yoga. No more need to teach. So from Uttamadhikari, the most the most endowed adhikari, Chittavritti Nirodha was enough. For the intermediate, Kriya Yoga was enough. For those who are striving, we have to introduce Ashtanga Yoga. That's the relevance of the portion of Ashtanga Yoga. And of that, what is the most important? Very first one, ahimsa. The supreme importance is yamaha. Yama means self-restraint. Before we try to restrain anything else, before we try to manage society, we have to control ourselves. Self-restraint. And therefore, yoga enumerates 5-part process. There are some other texts which expand this number. Because of the cryptic nature of Yoga Shastra, he has reduced it to 5. If you were to go to, for example, Yajnavalkya Smriti, he says ahimsa, satya, asteyam, brahmacharya, all the 4 common. Compassion or an attitude of sympathy. A sympathetic attitude is called daya. Arjavam, humility. Kshama, forgiveness. Dhritihi, steadfastness. Mitaharaha, control on how much food intake we do. And Shaucham, cleanliness, Yajnavalkya Smriti gives 10. So you can see these are also absorbed in the 5. Then there are other texts which talk about brahmacharya, daya, shanti, dhyana, ahimsa, asteya. Bhagavad Gita also starts with adveshta sarvabhutanam ahimsa. No matter which scriptural text you take, any dharma shastra you take from all Indian wisdom, nowhere ahimsa is left out. That's the primary importance in yama, and therefore the Jainas took ahimsa as very important, and that's how they introduced the concept of ahimsa paramo dharma. The highest dharma is ahimsa. So what exactly is this ahimsa? Ahimsa is non-injury. Satya is truth. Asteya is not taking things that belong to others, including ideas and concepts. We have got to give due credit. We talk about plagiarism and all that. As far as the Yoga Shastra, Bhagavad Gita, Upanishads and all that are concerned, we should be even more careful. There is no statement I make should be against the Shastra, and no statement should be taken as my own. All of that is coming from him only. That is asteyam. Brahmacharya is continence. And aparigraha is absence of avariciousness. So these are the 5 yamas we start about. Of all that, a great focus is given on ahimsa. Ahimsa taken to extremes is himsa. We have to clearly understand the concept of ahimsa in the light of not only Yoga Shastra but also in terms of Dharma Shastra. For example, let us say a burglar comes and attacks, and then I'll say, I am practicing ahimsa, and then you don't fight back. Is that himsa or ahimsa? What will the burglar do? He will come, destroy your property, injure members of your home. So you cannot say, I am not going to hurt anyone under any circumstances. Therefore, sometimes himsa also becomes a dharma and it becomes ahimsa. We call it as suna. The technical term given is suna. For instance, you see a cockroach in your basement. What do? Should you say, I'm going to practice ahimsa and then let it be? You don't have hatred to that particular cockroach. But the presence of a cockroach in your house is a health hazard. Killing that is called suna. It is not himsa. That clarity we have got to understand. There are people who take things to an extreme. They think that cutting grass is himsa. Is it so? If you let grass grow in your yard, what will happen? It is a health hazard. It will actually attract all kinds of insects. So here also non-injury, that is why the word used is ahimsa. They did not say nahimsa. Look at the construction of the word. Ahimsa means developing an amity towards all living beings. That is the interpretation of ahimsa. How do I say that? Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Adveshta sarvabhutanam. One who has no hatred towards any living being. That is indeed ahimsa, and therefore a yogi, what does he do? For the sake of yoga, we have to look at the ahimsa according to varna and ashrama dharma also. So what is varna and ashrama? Varna is actually depending on what is our characteristic and what work we do. It has nothing to do with jati. We have seen this in Bhagavad Gita quite carefully. Anyone who is doing an intellectual activity is a brahmana. So a person who is doing an intellectual work, for that varna, himsa is hurting somebody. But for a kshatriya who is defending the nation in war, ahimsa is killing your enemy. So, for a kshatriya, here many times people ask me about meat eating. Should I eat meat or should I not eat meat? Is meat eating himsa? Because some living being is, even though we don't directly butcher them, somebody has butchered. And there is an abhinivesha. Look at the Yoga Shastra. Every living being has the desire to cling to its life. And we have intervened and then actually caused himsa for that. And therefore, is it proper for me to eat meat or not? For that, the Shastra position is, what is your profession? If your profession requires that kind of bodybuilding and strength so that you have to take to manual activities, a person who works in hard labor, it is fine. So therefore, again, varnashrama dharma we have got to say. Sometimes himsa can also be done indirectly. I'll give one favorite example. I've always said, for just for the sake of conversation, I like halwa. Not that I like halwa, but I said I like halwa. I say all the time. So you make halwa, right? So we are 10 of us are here. For all of us, you have made a bowl of halwa. Then when I go to the buffet, because I like halwa, I eat the entire bowl. And not even one spoon is left for any of you. Is that himsa or ahimsa? It is. It is. So therefore, varna and ashrama dharma, himsa can be caused to others directly or indirectly, or even by our words. We call it as parusha vakya. Ahimsa in brahmacharya. How do we advise our youngsters that you should observe brahmacharya? In brahmacharya, what do we tell our children? You should show drive, energy, ambition, competition, all of these things. We tell our children, that's your dharma. Suppose we tell our children, no, don't be too competitive. You have to be compassionate to another person. It is himsa to your child. We have to strengthen them. But then we must also introduce a concept of compassion, cooperation, and collaboration. For instance, let us say your child is very, very efficient, very learned, and he has got an excellent understanding of the subject and doesn't share his knowledge with anybody. That person is doing himsa. Whereas if he shares, that of course when other person asks and all those caveats are there, when that is there, cooperation and collaboration is there, patience with the elders, patience with the teachers, then the person is practicing ahimsa in brahmacharya. In grihastha ahimsa and brahmacharya, what is that? Faith to the spouse on the one, and then preserving dharma at home and in society. If a householder fails to preserve dharma at home and in society, he is not only violating brahmacharya, but he is also violating ahimsa. And he is untruthful. So the drift of the argument is, if ahimsa is not clearly understood, the subsequent value of satya suffers, the subsequent value of brahmacharya suffers, asteya suffers. All the yamas will actually suffer unless ahimsa is properly observed. That's why yajna is called adhvara. And a priest who conducts yajna is called an adhvaryu. Dhvara means himsa. Adhvara means one who never commits himsa. That is why you will see yajna is the least invasive on the environment. When everybody was eating meat, that was a different day. Probably 3,000-4,000 years have passed. But today you will never see any yajna where animal sacrifice takes place. In Rujumarga, in everyday practice, Vamachara, let's not go there. So in Sadachara, what is happening in yajna? We don't even put the, in fact sometimes they do, but I don't speak about it. They bring, they cut the tree and they bring big logs and then burn. Actually, we are supposed to bring the firewood which has fallen down on the earth naturally. We are not supposed to cut any of those trees and bring firewood. But we should not take it to the extreme anyway. But just to be aware, ghee that we offer is taken without hurting the cow. So you can see Advara is a practice of ahimsa. Where do we do that? In satsanga. So also is satyam. Natural outcome of ahimsa is satyam. Satyam is not just factual truth, it is non-exaggeration. That's the correct interpretation of what satyam is. Non-exaggeration and anything that is spoken in for common good. And I have elsewhere also quoted before you the Dharma Shastra statements. What is Sanatana Dharma? We are all supposed to be from Sanatana Dharma. Satyam bruyat. We have to tell the truth. Priyam bruyat. We have to say what is pleasant. But at the same time, na bruyat satyam apriyam. Just because something is true, we should not, if it is unpleasant, and if it is not necessary to talk about it, don't tell. Na bruyat satyam apriyam. Priyancha nanratam bruyat. Even if it is very pleasant, don't tell a lie. Yesha dharma sanatana. That means you can see so much leeway is given in the interpretation of satyam. Na bruyat satyam apriyam is a way given for us not to speak. Because it is going to do himsa. So here also you see the genius of Patanjali Maharshi in the sequencing of the yamas. Because what do we say? Satyameva jayate na anratam. Mundakopanishad. Only truth triumphs, no doubt about it. But then he could have placed Satyam as the first of the yamas. Why he placed Ahimsa as the first of the yamas? Because any Satya that causes Himsa, you should not do it. Can you see the nuance of and the genius of Patanjali Maharshi? That is why we have to read the sutras also in sequence. And that's the sequential thinking that this Yoga Shastra provides to us. So, therefore, why we should be truthful? Because untruth gives rise to complications. I should remember every lie I told you, unfortunately. So it is easier for me to tell the truth. That's okay. Maybe I have got a razor-sharp memory. I'll never forget what untruth I told you. But when I tell untruth, it disturbs me. I will be very uncomfortable with myself when I tell untruth. Mahabharata Yuddha is going on. In this Yuddha, Drona has become extremely formidable. In one sweep, he is killing 10,000 people. And he had a boon. As long as he is holding the weapon, he cannot be killed. Because there is no astra that he could not stop. And unless he is killed, there is no question of victory for the Pandavas. So as Krishna comes to thinks about it, whatever anybody says, Drona will not believe. Anyone, including Krishna himself, he will not believe. The only person when he says something that Drona will believe is when Yudhishthira says. This is the power of Satya. Once a person gets the name Satya Parakramaha, that's what we call Rama in Ramayana. Ramo dvirna bhashate. Rama does not say a thing in two different ways. When such a person speaks, there is no second guessing of what that person says. He calls Yudhishthira. You want to win the war? Of course. For two reasons. One is dharma samstapana has to take place. And second thing is proper transfer of power has to take place. The right king should be there. So Yudhishthira has to be the right king. And Yudhishthira is known for his truthfulness. So he says, tell, shout that Ashwatthama is dead. Yudhishthira says, no, I cannot tell a lie. So he gets an elephant by name Ashwatthama. In Sanskrit it is called Kunjara. Okay, Yudhishthira, this is what is going to happen now. We will kill this Ashwatthama elephant. Now you tell the truth. Ashwatthamo hataha kunjara. Sanskrit is a beautiful language because you can put the words anywhere. So Krishna gives the formula saying, tell now this. Ashwatthamo hataha kunjaraha. An elephant by name Ashwatthama died. It's truth. So now Yudhishthira in his bellowing voice is Ashwatthamo hataha. Then Krishna would have given instruction, make a big noise with kettle drums and the bugles and everything. And the Kunjara was completely obscured in the noise. Drona throws his weapon and Arjuna kills. That story you know very well. Huh? I'm sorry, Drishtadyumna. Drishtadyumna actually kills him. So now, because that was why Drishtadyumna was born anyway. Thank you. So,
Yudhishthira also says Kunjara in a low
tone.
Low tone. That was the instruction. Yeah. But he could not tell untruth. That's the question.
His chariot is supposed to have gone down.
And gone down. Udatta, Anudatta, Swarita, you know, Veda mantra.
His chariot was supposed to be the height. And it actually
and then he
lowered.
says, Ashwatthamo hataha kunjara.
Yeah.
Or it could be that Ashwatthama was killed by an elephant.
No, Ashwatthama is a...
He's alive.
He is a Chiranjeevi. Ashwatthamo balihi vyasaha Ashwatthamo balir vyasaha Hanumamscha vibhishanaha kripa parashuramascha saptete Chiranjeevinaha. Now the point with reference to Satya is...
Bhima is also there, right? Bhima.
No, Bhima is not there.
Bhima died.
Bhima dies.
No, isn't he one of the Chiranjeevis?
No. Ashwatthamo balihi vyasaha Hanumamscha vibhishanaha kripaha parashuramascha saptete Chiranjeevinaha. 7 of them.
Bhima falls from the
Yeah.
end of Mahabharata.
So the point with reference to Satya and Ahimsa is this episode where Yudhishthira became a party to this statement which killed Drona, never forgave himself. Throughout the rest of his life it bothered him. So the point I'm trying to make is when we tell a lie, that seems to linger on in throughout our life and eats from within. So we are doing ahimsa to ourselves. So ahimsa satyam.
It only hurts once.
Isn't it?
When you speak the truth, it only hurts once.
So
When you speak the lie, it hurts all the time. Because you have to tell more.
But having said this, it is not a hopeless situation because there is always paschatapa and all those atonements are there. You know, Shastra doesn't completely condemn a person. There is always a prayaschitta. And then...
I know what all the car salesmen were going to think. Used car salesmen are going to say. That's a life.
Yeah.
You know.
Their livelihood.
There is livelihood.
Livelihood,
So
yes,
they
livelihood.
justify. I think there's a justification, man.
That's why
Whether it causes a hurt or not. You know, whether the
it
lie
should not
causes
hurt.
a hurt or
White
not.
lies, you have to do white
Yeah.
lies. In fact, that's very much permitted in Shastra. That is why I already said non-exaggeration and non-injurious.
Poor Nagendra now he has to say wherever he is going.
Yeah, that he can twist it right. Yes, he can.
Also, sir, you can tell lie in a prana, mana, when you are protecting yourself or your wife, runa, something. There are 4 reasons why you then can You're officially allowed to lie.
They talk about it, you tell 1,000 lies and get your daughter married and so on and so forth. So the concept here is, again, let's come back to the fundamental theme of Yoga Shastra. It affects Chitta Vritti Nirodha, isn't it? Anecdotes being apart. If the untruths and that I am doing and the himsa that I have created constantly bothers me within me, then how can you control your modification of the mind? Chitta Vritti Nirodha. And by wedding ourselves to a proper satya, we also cleanse our karmas. That also happens. Because it's a prashchitta karma actually. Saying that from now onwards, I will not tell any injurious falsehood or injurious truth also, unless it is very, very essential. Then asteya is the next derivative. Magrata kasya siddhanam. If we appropriate somebody's property, what happens? It is going to create a himsa for that person. And then brahmacharya, of course, is very obvious. It is continent, faithfulness within marriage, celibacy. More than all that, it is control on craving. That is the ultimate thing you have to do. Because desire has got to be moderated. So this control on craving. And aparigraha is not being greedy. So we have got to properly interpret the term. Aparigraha. Parigraha means to take, to hold on to grab. When do we grab? When we become greedy. Otherwise, right royally, you become a billionaire, multi-billionaire, you should. Our Shastra say, Vidyam Arthancha Sadhayat. Earning money and becoming wealthy is a virtue. As long as it is non-injurious. That is why they said Ahimsa Paramo Dharma, the highest dharma, because whether it is Satya, Asteya, Aparigraha, everything points to Ahimsa and say, am I not hurting? All of these are moral principles. Without committing to these 5 moral principles, there will be no spiritual growth. So morality is not a favor we do on society. It is a necessity for our Chitta Vritti Nirodha. It is a necessity for our Manashanti. And when this is there, then we succeed personally and in society. Otherwise, we fail in both. Now, an interesting question came to my mind. Why does man fall down? A corollary to that question. If committing himsa, telling a lie, etc., is my nature, can it be changed? If it is my nature, you cannot change it. How can you change nature? Can you make a tiger eat grass? An elephant? Can you make a lion eat grass? You can never do it. Whatever yoga you teach, you give a lecture to a lion on ahimsa. Will it give it up? So if human being is actually has a tendency to do himsa, asatya, etc., no amount of yoga is going to uplift him. Then the whole of Ashtanga Yoga system completely fails if we accept it as the nature of man. In fact, it is not the nature of man. We have gone away from our nature. We are only trying to regain our original quality. This you see every Rakshasa. How did he come? He was a noble person. He was a Gandharva, he was a Yaksha, he was a Devata. He gets into a little bit of a temptation and then he is condemned to fall on the earth. Nahusha becomes Devendra. And then he gets pride. And with that pride insults Agastya. And so he becomes a snake. Bhandasura. We will talk more about it, about Bhandasura next week. So there has been a fall from our original state. So what Patanjali Maharishi is saying is, you regain your original divine status. Akshitamasi, Achyutamasi, Pranasamshitamasi. You know that mantra from Chandogya? Achyutamasi, Akshitamasi, Pranasamshi. You are imperishable. You are perfect. You are virtuous. But we have fallen down because of coming into contact with the world, with the glitter of the world. How do we make sure that the glitter is tempered? Satsanga. Because in Satsanga we control all those tendencies. And in Satsanga we reinforce ourselves and retrace our steps. So the next question is, what is the spiritual basis for these yamas? Even before we think of ahimsa, it is actually reverence for life. It is because I have so much of reverence and bhakti for life, I practice ahimsa, I practice truth, etc. Because what does the Bible say? Man is created in the image of God, right? I like that concept very much. Man is created in the image of God. My child, because I am a human being, my child is also a human being, isn't it? Every definition of a human being is there in my child also. And therefore, if I am created in the image of God, I should also be godly. Right? Where did we lose that? It is because only the form of God remained, godliness disappeared. So what was the tipping point? What was the breaking point? Milton, Paradise Lost. Of man's first disobedience and the fruit of that forbidden tree. First disobedience is disobedience of the yamas. When this disobedience and the fruit of that forbidden tree was taken, then what happened? It gave us the mortal taste. We who were used to the divine taste of ahimsa, satya, asteya, we got a taste of the mortal taste, and therefore we brought death into the world and all our woe. Beautiful beginning of Paradise Lost, of man's first disobedience and the fruit of that forbidden tree, whose mortal taste brought death into the world and all our woe. Mortal taste is himsa. Just as when a tiger or a lion tastes human blood, it hunts only humans. Therefore, only the image remained. Godliness disappeared. But since man was born in godliness, godliness is his nature, this sutra is instructing us, have reverence to life. Reverence to life, when we have practice of yama, becomes natural to us. We don't have to strain. So how do we express reverence to life? We know how to love. We love our family, we love our children, we love our friends. That love has got to get the quality of bhakti. Another poem, beautiful poem that comes to my mind is Coleridge's The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Just like it happened to Valmiki. Valmiki in the morning he goes to the Tamasa River, and in that Tamasa River he sees a hunter shoot one of the lovebirds. The mariner is going with all his crew and they are on the high seas. In the southern part hemisphere, you go to the ocean south of South America, south of Africa, and way south of the Indian subcontinent, Indian Ocean. There is a very special bird called albatross. These albatross are very much there, and when they were going in the South Seas, an albatross comes and sits on the mast of this ship. And this mariner simply shoots it down. Probably it was flying in the seas and then it was tired. Sometimes, they sit on the mast and they rest. An innocent bird. And he shoots. Coleridge writes, God's wrath struck. How does God's wrath strike on a human being? It can strike the human being, right? Or it can strike everything that he possesses and he survives. He survives. Is that not what happened to Yudhishthira? He survived. Everybody died. 18 Akshohinis died. This is exactly what happened in this crew on the ship. They ran out of drinking water. Water everywhere. Not a drop to drink. The entire crew died. The mariner survives. And he looks all around us, all around him. And he finds everybody is dead. Metaphor. A person who has no yama, he will discover everything collapsing around him. Why it has not happened to any of us? It is because of A, satsanga, and B, the natural godliness in us. But anyone who has gone to the extreme, have they survived? Go back and see history. Miserable deaths. Whether it is Saddam Hussein, dies in a hole. Hitler dies in a bunker. One who was in glittering gold palace, Saddam Hussein. What happened? Because of himsa. How much more can we emphasize the importance of yamas? Finally, the mariner comes to the conclusion. He prayeth best who loveth best. All things great and small, for the dear God who loveth us, he made and loveth all. With this beautiful quatrain, Ancient Mariner ends. So, reverence to life is love to everybody and a return to godliness. And the portal is Sarvabhuta Daya Pushpam, where one entertains this immense amount of ahimsa. Now you see the relevance of why Sutra number 1 of this chapter, Tapaswadhyaya Ishvara Pranidhanani, is not adequate. You can do all the tapas, you can do all the study of the scripture, you can do all the worship. If it does not translate itself into the Parama Prema Rupa of all our fellow beings, expressed as yamas, of the 5 yamas, we will never regain the original divine status. And therefore, Patanjali Maharshi starts off with the yamas. So with this, the following practice of the 7 other Ashtanga, of the Ashtanga Yoga, nobody need to motivate us to do it. It just happens. More we'll see in our next class.